And what I've learned is, and I learned it time and again, is that every industry has the toughest time making the decision that, yes, we're going to do this. But once they make the commitment to do it, then the process takes off and it becomes fully iterative. And they all buy in, they all want to drive it, they all want to own it.
Welcome to Getting It Done. Today you'll meet Dan Varroney, author of Reimagining Industry Growth, an interesting look at trade associations and the valuable role they play in manufacturing. And thank you for joining us. I don't know if you want to just quickly tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Well, first of all, Ivan, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm thrilled to be here. So my name is Dan Varroney. I founded a company 11 years ago called Potomac Core Consulting. We're based in Northern Virginia, about 25 miles southwest of Washington, D.C. Now, my company and my team does some really interesting work. We do market research and strategy work with trade associations. And the work that we do is we look to build industry trade association strategic partnerships that help industries surface challenges, surface solutions, and position their industries for long-term growth. And as I said, the company's been open for 11 years. And about 14 months ago, my first book came out, Reimagining Industry Growth. The book's publisher is Wiley. And I'm very excited to talk to you about that book today. And if you want, you can even ask me if there's going to be a second book,
Okay,
and we can
great,
talk about that
great.
too.
Thank you. Yes, so I've read the book. I found it fascinating. I must say my perspective of trade associations has changed since reading the book. I had a little bit of a potentially negative view of trade associations, didn't quite understand the value they added, and however, that is completely changed. But maybe if you can explain to us briefly what you think a trade association is and does.
So here's what I want to do for sake of this conversation, that we think in terms of political parties and issue preferences. I think in terms of communities. Communities are especially important because communities give you the ability to surface and learn from one another and to build direction of where you all want to go together. Trade associations have been around for a very long time, actually almost from the beginning of time. But what trade associations do, let's say from a US perspective and even from a global perspective, is this. These are organizations that represent corporations in industry segments, or in some cases, there are just broad segments like manufacturing. So here in the United States, there's the National Association of Manufacturers. And then there are specific industry segment trade associations. So essentially what they do is they organize through a board of directors. The board of directors collaborates with the staff to build strategies. These strategies are about shaping an external environment that's more beneficial, more advantageous for that industry segment.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Reading the book, a couple of things that popped up for me. One thing, it seems like government overreach came up a couple of times. And I thought it made a lot of sense that you needed a substantial voice in government, or at least communicating with government, representing that community, and preventing. I think you mentioned the word where government's sort of easy answer to any problem is to just create a new law to ban it or forbid it. And you had some great examples of how communities liaising with government, it sort of came out with a win-win scenario as opposed to just government overreaching and sort of wielding a bigger stick.
Ivan, what's interesting, I think that we live in a hyper-partisan world. People lock themselves into positions and they lose sight of the bigger picture. And candidly, it's at everyone's expense. In the end, someone or mostly everyone ends up losing because we lose sight of the bigger picture. So the trade association is not meant by their definition, to be a hyper-partisan vehicle. It's meant to be a collaborator. So collaborators look for, identify solutions, and they look for the win-win. So in reading my book, what I really love about my book is the ability of these industries and these trade associations to build and deliver solutions. So from a practical basis, we turn the clock back 3 years ago and we think about the food industry here in the United States. Here in the United States, the Food and Drug Administration, the Centers for Disease Control said, we've got to shut everything down. Well, they forgot to remember that we still needed to eat, right? We still needed to eat. So there was a Food and Beverage Issues Alliance that was already organized, and the leadership of this group connected with their contacts, some of the leadership at both the FDA and the CDC, and they said, so we are willing to listen closely to collaborate with you to develop worker safety protocols that will keep workers safe. One, to develop the food and deliver the food safely to the retail stores. And it was a very successful effort. Bottom line is, as a result of that effort, the American people were able to keep eating. So I think that's one example of a win-win collaboration that really makes a difference.
Even
Highly relevant, and it's sort of a more often than not, it's about solutions. It's not about partisan bickering.
win-win. It's got that. I think that is the goal. And you came up with another word, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but you came up with it called co-opetition, which
Yes.
yeah. Well, maybe you can unpack that.
Sure. Co-opetition is an interesting term for lots of reasons. So I want you to think of a board of directors of the American Bakers Association. We'll stay on that path for a while anyway. You've got competitors that sit on that board of directors, but for sake of the industry and for sake of the rising tide that lifts all boats, this is co-opetition. They're cooperating with one another to help be the rising tide that lifts all of their boats so they can all be successful. The free market is alive and well. It's thriving here in the United States. But the point is, the trade association is the vehicle by which you can be the rising tide that lifts all boats through the trade association. Another form of co-opetition happens through, as you know, I talk about ecosystems. So within the ecosystems, there are competitive trade associations. And these competitors come together for the sake of not just the greater good, but the greatest good. The greatest good meaning that if we are all the rising tide that lifts all boats, then we all win and our individual trade associations win. So it starts with a different premise, Ivan. Bottom line, this is a different premise. We're not here to knock each other down. We're here to lift the entire industry up.
Exactly. I like that very much. I'm a big fan of sort of abundance thinking, and say there's enough for everyone.
Yes.
Yes. And yeah, there's enough for everyone.
Yes. Oh my God, there
where
is.
we compete because that's where we should compete, and where we don't need to compete, then let's work together, as you say, to benefit the entire community or the ecosystem that we're working with. And I think it's a great lesson for a lot of companies, especially, I'm a big fan of smaller businesses, small to medium-sized businesses.
Yes.
And I think,
As am I.
I would imagine that a lot of times, like a smaller guy will think, oh, the trade association doesn't think of me, or it's too big for me, or I'm not, I'm sort of a very small fish in that pond. But I think that's not the case. So
in my book, in many instances, so if you look at the National Marine Manufacturers Association, there is more than an equal amount of the small and medium-sized companies, right? So they've got the boat owners, meaning the boat makers rather, they've got the boat equipment makers and the suppliers, and they all sit around the same table, but there's small and medium-sized company leaders as well as the large company leaders. At the end of the day, You know, it's interesting here in the United States. A majority of business owners are small and medium-sized business owners. That's the bottom line, Ivan. And you've got to have them at the table. And the other thing is that when the US economy is growing, for example, it's growing because those small and mid-sized businesses are doing the lion's share of the hiring.
Agreed. I actually think that's actually the strength of the US is that middle tier of companies because
Yes.
they have drivers and they have reception staff and they have, so whereas when you get to a massive company,
Yes.
they're so highly optimized that you actually, you don't get the benefit of that hiring. And I think also for the smaller guys, they're much more flexible. They can respond to new trends, new problems. And I think that's actually sort of the
Yeah.
hidden strength of the US is all these mid-tier
Yeah.
guys that provide like the
Yes.
backbone. And
Yeah.
if one or two of them struggle, it doesn't mean the whole economy struggles because
You're absolutely right. One of the case studies is on the asphalt pavement industry, and I've absolutely fallen in love with the industry for a lot of reasons. One of them is they're small and mid-sized businesses. Two, they're problem solvers. Three, they see themselves as fully integrated in all the communities that they serve. Four, they are absolutely committed to the environment. 95% of asphalt pavement is recycled products. And by 2050, they have committed the industry through their trade association, through the National Asphalt Pavement Association here in the United States. They've committed themselves to net zero carbon. And one of the businesses, the recent past chairman of that organization, is a person by the name of Jim Mitchell. He's CEO of a company called Superior Paving, which is only about 10 miles from where I sit. And what's just impressive about this company is how it's a family culture, a family business. It's a community. Everybody cares about one another. And they really care about the communities that they work in. It's just a marvelous company.
and when it comes to trade association, what is the biggest problem you think they solve on behalf of members?
You know, the biggest thing they need to do is they need to achieve critical mass and critical mass buy-in. And what I mean by that is that we all have to be in the co-opetition mindset. We all have to understand that it's going to be a rising tide that lifts all boats. The second thing that needs to happen is that they all need to be willing to come to the table and be fully transparent. And what I mean by that is what is it that we all need to achieve as an industry? What are our challenges, and how are we going to work together to get there? And then how will we leverage our trade association to do it? And what I've learned is, and I learned it time and again, is that every industry has the toughest time making the decision that, yes, we're going to do this. But once they make the commitment to do it, then the process takes off and it becomes fully iterative. And they all buy in, they all want to drive it, they all want to own it. And I see it repeatedly in industries, and it's just really fun. It's really fun because, some consulting firms see their work as, I'm in this business to make money. At the end of the day, I'm in business to serve and enable others to find solutions where they all win together. I had someone from a publication call me a few weeks ago and said, "Hey, I bet you wrote this book to make a lot of money and to get a lot of clients." And I said,
Yes,
"I'm sorry,
exactly.
you just don't know
Exactly.
who I am." I, and I just said, let's just spend a few minutes going through that. So for me, the fun of the work is getting people to the table to hear each other, learn from one another, and go in the same direction. That's the biggest challenge. And I take that on as my personal challenge. And the way we get people to hear each other is we provide them with actionable industry research. And that actionable industry research, I mean, you've got to see it, the eyes open, the mouths open. I was with a board just about 2 weeks ago. They had asked me to come down and talk about my book on building strategic partnerships. And I got to tell you, I've had email communication. I had board members pulling me aside during and after the meeting saying, my God, this has really opened our eyes. We now see the full potential of the strategic partnership we can build with our industry trade
You've got a
association.
quote in the book where you say others say that a longer term cohesive industry growth strategy is not feasible. So you talk about that. So obviously there's a pushback for people that maybe just don't share the same way of thinking, or maybe just don't understand. They don't see it.
You know, so I would call sometimes trade associations can be inside out versus outside in. And I talk about inside out and outside in my book. And a trade association can sometimes get consumed with all the things they're doing and how hard they're working. At the end of the day, what really matters is what outcomes are the industry achieving as a result of the partnership and what their trade association is able to deliver. And at the beginning of every relationship that my team and I have with a trade association client, sometimes we have to get through that initial pushback and get them to see that the ultimate win-win is going to be the game change for the industry and for them.
It must be a challenge, though. I mean, because
Yes, Ivan, it is. But I will tell you, I have got the zeal of a missionary. I absolutely believe in this. And, I think all too often consultants want to be the expert. I want to be the I want to be the student more than I want to be the teacher. And what I mean by that is that I will give them examples of what I've learned and how it's moved the needle and how it makes the difference. And then I work really hard to build trust. And you really have to be fully invested in that approach. You know, that's the difference between my firm and a lot of other firms. They want to get clients, they want to build them, and they want to move on. I want to get clients, build long-term relationships, and then even a year or two or three after the work is done, I'm still in touch with them to see how things are going.
I think that's actually the secret to the success. Then the byproduct is the money.
Yes.
The doing what you do with the zeal and passion is what will then generate the money, and that's
Yes.
the right way to do it. So when that person called you and he said, "I'm sure you did this to make money," I agree with you completely. If we did it to make money, we probably wouldn't make money. We do these things because we love it, and it's challenging and it's rewarding, and then hopefully by the end of all of that, we make some money and it is good. I wanted to ask you from an SME angle, why should he join, and at what level should he join? Because I'm sure there's probably many people that join the association because they almost feel obliged to say, I'm part of ABC Association. And as opposed to, so as an SME, you often head down in your business, putting out fires. And next thing it's like, hey, there's a trade association event. I think I understand why they should go, but maybe you could elaborate on that.
In reading the introduction of my book, there is a boat manufacturer who had that perspective early on when he's still running a company. And essentially what he learned was, I am going to be with the smartest people
Yes,
if
clever.
I get on this board of directors. I am going to learn from them. They'll learn from me, but I'm creating opportunities to grow my business as a result of this relationship. So these SMEs are missing a bet and an opportunity by not engaging. They should initially try and get on a committee in an area that really makes a difference, not only for their company, but for their industry, and then work really hard to get on the board of directors and play a key role. There again, these SMEs are absolutely important to every industry. And the more they get engaged and fully integrated in their trade association, the better the trade association and the better the industry is going to become.
It's sort of the argument where people say, I don't vote because my vote doesn't count. Whereas you need to vote, otherwise you don't have a say. And here it's the sort of the same
Yep.
thing. Is you can't be at the mercy of your industry. You should be within the industry, making sure that the industry succeeds and your community succeeds. So it makes a lot of sense to me. There was
Yeah.
another example in your book where, so now we're trying to figure out the gap between the association, how much it should be doing with regard to its members. And there was an example, I think, with the NMME, and it was where they did an inventory analysis of inventory within the ecosystem, and they were discovering that inventory versus sales was increasing. And he put out a newsletter saying, this is what we found. I think he actively said, he didn't want to say this is what you should do. He just said, this is what we found. And then one of his members came to him and said, you're taking a big chance by saying that, because, I've cut back production, and if you're wrong, I'm really going to be irritated or angry. Fortunately, he was right, and it worked well. But, what do you say to the trade association where they're scared to be that? Because I think it's a wonderful feature of the trade association, but how do you get them to be brave, almost brave enough to,
Yeah.
to do exactly what that one did?
So
Yes.
that was Tom Damrock that said that. And so here's what I'll say really quickly is that it's about business acumen. I think for the trade association that thinks and acts like their members, that literally has the ability to go around to the other side of their members' desks and think and solve problems and address issues in the way that they do, you're better equipped to take those chances. So for people like Tom Domrick, he was so read into the industry. He understood what made it move. And Tom is also a numbers person. He's an accountant and a data person, and he absorbs large volumes of information, and he's able to come up with instant assessments based on data and information. But he was able to do that because he really learned the industry. He knew what drove the
I thought
industry.
it was fascinating, very brave, and actually incredibly useful, because that's real value add from an association angle. Because you're helping the manufacturers. I mean, it's like an early warning system that is very hard for you to know on your own. If you're an
Yes,
individual manufacturer on your own, it's very hard to know this. But as the association, so for me, very,
yes.
very useful role. Yeah.
Again,
Yes.
especially for
Yes.
the
They don't have the
SMEs,
resources.
the
Yeah.
SMEs having that kind of information, it's an absolutely
So
magnificent
then the
resource.
question I had as well was, how do SMEs forge partnerships? How do they, again, if you think, maybe it's a small 3-4 man business or person business, how do they think outside of their business, outside of their day-to-day box? Because I think that's going to be the secret of their success, but they maybe can't see a route to how, you say create a partnership. What?
So that is an absolute great question for this conversation. So here in the United States, there's a group called the Young Presidents Organization, YPO, and you've got to pay to be a member of it. And you literally go and you spend time each month with other business owners brainstorming uh, challenges and solutions and so on and so forth. And what's interesting is that the trade association relationship can be a 5, 10, 15-year relationship by which you can meet other companies. So an example would be, so as you know, in my book, I talked about strategic partnerships like Starbucks and Pepsi, right, for distribution of the bottled Frappuccino. That was an example. I talked about Starbucks and
Great,
Barnes and
great
Noble, the
partnership.
bookstore. The reason why I did is yeah, it's a marvelous partnership. So the reason why I did is because as the '80s ended, we came into the '90s. Boards were looking for growth, and companies that didn't want to merge built these strategic partnerships to get access into other markets that they didn't have today. So they went to companies that had either had market access, that had skills and resources they didn't, and it became a win-win relationship. What I think really matters today is that companies, if you go to a trade association, you are going to build alliances and relationships you don't have today. And you can build a strategic partnership that could ultimately grow your top line in ways that it's not growing today. Or you could come up with a joint venture on developing a
Absolutely.
brand new product and putting it to the marketplace and growing that way. There are all kinds of opportunities. The trade association is not just the trade association on its own. The ones that are strategic partnership based are doing amazing work at facilitating these partnerships. Trade associations are integrators, aggregators, and curators. They're integrators of people and information. They're aggregators of people and knowledge, and they're curators of what everybody thinks and what everybody does. And the trade association is the gathering place to connect all three of
Makes
those.
sense. What should they be doing that they're not doing as a trade association? The
Which
actual
any
any one of the sort
organization.
of common trade associations? What?
So they need to do a gut check. They need to do a gut check, and that gut check is it needs to be about research, not research with net promoter scores or satisfaction scores, but do research around alignment scores.
Mm,
What are our industry's challenges? What are the business outcomes they seek to achieve? And
mm,
how aligned are we with those? Because that's the real deal. You want to know how aligned you are. And then take that alignment score and then brainstorm with your board and other industry leaders for how you can build a strategy or a long-term roadmap to optimize that alignment by helping the industry achieve its
okay, that
outcomes.
makes perfect sense. I think sometimes, especially if it's an older association, the momentum of what we've done in the past is what we keep doing in the future, and they maybe forget why they exist potentially. And
Yes.
it's just a natural thing in the organization. Why do you do what did you do? Is because I was told to do what I do, and that's why I do it, as opposed to sort of unpacking and sanity checking and saying, so back to your alignment score. That makes a lot of sense.
It's sort of, no trade association ever wants to be uh, the organization that is years of tradition unhampered by progress. Um, Too many changes happening too quickly. We all know them about
Absolutely.
them faster than ever before. And we have got to be forward thinking, forward leaning, and thinking tens of thousands of miles around the corner and into the future. What you'll find interesting is my team and I have been working with clients that are looking to build long-term industry roadmaps and using the trade association to build those roadmaps, if you can imagine. Because the
Yes.
research that we do is the truth teller. It's the truth teller. And one of the things I wrote in my book is that one of the key characteristics is CEOs of trade associations have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I like that.
You have to be comfortable with being
I like that.
uncomfortable,
Well,
right? And what's interesting to me is that the five CEOs I wrote about, and I've got a CEO group called the Strategic Guidance Lab with 55 trade association CEOs, and every one of them, Ivan, is absolutely
I
comfortable with
think I
being
think
uncomfortable.
you gave an example of a one of these potential CEOs where they said the trust that he had created between like manufacturers and retailers or distributors was that he was often swapping sides of the table. So he would change his hat and be okay.
Yes,
Today I'm on the retail side, then I'm on the manufacturer side, then I'm on the
yes,
distribution side. And I think that's a great skill that that they should have, so that they can either sell everyone's perspective, or defend everyone's perspective at any given time. And I think going back to your opening comments, where a lot of people are quite divisive, but that's not the word you used. You used the word partisanal. I think partisan,
Yeah, partisan, locked
and
into
I
a
think
perspective. And Ivan, I'll give you an example. It's fascinating to me, and I'm going to quote you on this. There's plenty of opportunity, plenty of market for everyone. The energy issue, it just confounds me here in the United States. First of all, you can't do an automatic transition from where you
yeah,
are to where you want to be. There's got to be a 25, at least a 25
absolutely.
or more year strategy. And instead of the government, and this isn't a partisan statement, instead of the government regulators saying we're doing this now or incentivizing one form of energy over the others, it's just counterproductive. Here's what we do want: we want all the energy providers to come together as one ecosystem, and we want to encourage them to do the following. What is it they need to do in order to get from where we are to where we want to be? Well, first of all, we've got to
Choice.
keep pumping
Yeah,
oil. And by the way, U.S. oil is the cleanest burning oil in the world. However, it should it should still get even cleaner burning in the meantime. But at the same time, we ought to incentivize everybody else to come up with whatever's next, and then come up with the ability through rights of way to give everybody the ability to distribute, to generate and distribute to consumers and give them the ability to choose whatever they want. And you do that by giving what I would call a broad-based tax incentive, a permanent research and development, and then an investment tax credit that gives all these people the ability to invent and come up with whatever's next. And then have the government stand out of the way, and whoever comes up with
yeah,
whatever it's going to be, then do it. But let the industry as a whole come up with their own roadmap for what it is they need to do. Give them the ability through a permanent research and development tax credit and an investment tax credit to do all these things. And oh, by the way, for the SMEs, uh,
mm,
maybe we give them higher write-offs. Maybe we give them 100% expensing for purchasing new equipment to do this invention. So there's all kinds of things that can be done. And remember, when you look at the numbers say the largest amount of job growth comes from
yeah,
the smaller companies. So why not incentivize them to hire more
yeah,
people?
exactly.
See where I'm going? So to me, it's about the win-win. Let's just connect the dots. Let's take our partisan hats off, and let's say we all want cleaner air. We all want cleaner water to drink. Let's think about how
And
we can
keep in
do
mind,
that.
it's a 25-year journey. It's not an overnight journey, and let's not do anything crazy
Yeah,
that creates more chaos than the benefit that it adds.
yeah, yeah. It's sort of and again, I've watched the. So it's the uh, you know, people say we love electricity. Well, guess what? You need like
Yeah,
coal and natural gas to generate electricity. So, so until you come up with an alternative way to generate that electricity, you've got to keep doing what you're doing now. At the same time, coal has come a long way, not all the way, but they've come a long way with scrubbers and other clean coal technology that's made a difference. Natural gas is a very clean
yeah,
burning
absolutely.
form of energy. So, it again, to me, it's sort of like, again, I listen to both sides, and some days it'll give me a headache because one side will say, no, it's all or nothing, and the other side will say it's all or nothing. And I'll just say, well,
Yeah,
guess what? We're all losing. We're all losing because you all want it your way. And at the end of the day, so Gallup is a public polling firm here in the United States. And I was preparing to give a speech to an energy trade association just a few months ago. So I looked at a bunch of polls that are probably 10 to 15 years old. And here's what you'll find fascinating: that the American people do
exactly.
want a cleaner
Why would
environment.
not? Why would?
The, the, the,
Yes.
the answer is they do. Well, I do. So, so if that's the case, now the American people get very uncomfortable. So look at it this way. Uh, when money gets tight, so inflation's high here. So the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, they backed off of it because of the cost and the recession. Now it's the cost and the impending recession. But generally speaking, I think there's a way forward. I think there's a way forward, Ivan, and people have got to stop going into their corners and look at this on a
I
much
agree.
broader
I agree.
basis.
And the strategy is sort of empower the people and then get out the way. That's what the government should be doing. You know,
So, Ivan, here's the point I want to make is trade associations are neutral integrators. Not everybody agrees on everything, but what trade associations do exceedingly well is they bring all sides together and they're able to hammer out a broad-based consensus where everybody wins. That's why I am so pro trade association. I learned it writing the book. Uh, I see this as a long-term solution in energy. I absolutely see this as a long-term solution on supply chains and on
with right
education.
people that are facilitating that, because it's not
Yes,
somebody who is just, who hasn't got the skill set, the experience, the knowledge, the history within that industry. So it's the correct people. So the question was I was going
yeah,
to ask is why you love trade associations. I think you just answered it.
yeah, yeah. I absolutely love them, and I spent 23 years at the National Association of Manufacturers, and I loved it because we didn't have a political action committee. It was all about advancing manufacturing, creating manufacturing jobs, and helping manufacturers be successful.
Brilliant.
And I'll tell you, it just left a lasting impression on me. And if you don't think that there were internal policy disagreements among companies, but we had great staff leadership, marvelous CEO. And on staff, we were Republicans,
Yeah.
Democrats, and independents. It didn't matter. We were all about manufacturing. And my takeaway from those 23 years is that if it can happen there, it can happen everywhere.
It's a nice uplifting perspective or thought for a change, because sometimes it's very doom and gloom at the
Yes,
moment, and thinking about this and thinking about the
yes,
process and the people, it's very positive. It's a
yeah,
very positive, and that's what I got from the book. Actually, was that
yeah,
you left thinking like,
yeah,
okay, great, there is a mechanism.
there is a mechanism, and that's why I'm speaking on it. I'm working through my CEO group, working through other networks, getting on podcasts like this,
Brilliant.
and getting the word out. I'm
Yeah,
absolutely, again, I've
excellent,
got the zeal of a missionary
excellent.
on this.
Okay.
So I want to close with something. So when I was growing up here in the United States, the Kennedy
Yeah.
name is known really well. So Bobby Kennedy had been Attorney General for his brother, President Kennedy, and then was a candidate for president, and then was assassinated. But uh, something he said stayed with me. So I was in grammar school when he was killed, and one of the things he said that has stuck with me throughout my life was, "Some see things as they are, and ask why. I see things as they
Yes,
could be
brilliant.
and say,
Yeah,
why not?"
brilliant.
You know, and so for me, this strategic partnership is I see
Why not?
things as they could
Exactly.
be and
And
say, why
exactly,
not?
and enough with all the doom, gloom, and naysayers. Let's work with what we have.
Yeah,
We've got
yeah,
the tools, we've got the mechanism, we've got the people, we've got
yes.
the incentive, we've got the drive. Let's make it happen.
Let's collaborate. Let's come
Yeah,
together and
as
let's
as
make it
Desmond would say,
happen.
let's get it done.
Let's get it done. Absolutely. So let me tell your listeners how they can find me. So my company is at potomaccore.com. And there is an email address. You can find Potomac Core on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on LinkedIn. And if you send me a message, I'm happy to get back to you. But most importantly, here's where you can buy the book. You can buy the book at Amazon.com or you can go to wiley.com and look up Reimagining
Excellent.
Industry Growth.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you for your time. It was a great chatting to you. And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk again.
We will talk again. It's a pleasure.
Well.
Thank you for including me in your
Excellent.
podcast.